So yeah, hello, 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 beautiful people. And then people said hello. And then people
Hi.
said hello. Welcome to welcome to our Conscious Parenting Convo series. We are a platform that helps parents and caregivers parent from a place of awareness to better understand and support children in their different stages of development. As your host, I am Conscious Thoko, and I'm happy to be here. I'm not alone. I am with South Africa's fave, and I think tonight's conversation is going to be an extra special one because we have an author. Like I said, it's South Africa's fave, and so the conversation will not be centered only around reading, but we'll be touching a little bit on writing as well because we can go as far as we can with tonight's guest. So for me, I want to thank you for accepting the invite. I hope that the conversation between you and I will be one that will elevate our thinking and encourage us parents to do what we need to do in order to make sure that our kids have that advantage in terms of, being able to read so that they can progress in life and so that they can travel. But without saying any much further, I would like to hand over to you rather, hand over to you for you to kindly introduce yourself and let people know as to how it is, why I've got such a big smile on my face, and why I say you're South Africa's favorite, and why I'm actually excited to be in conversation with you tonight.
Okay, always tricky to introduce myself. So my name is Refiloe Moahloli, and I am a children's book author, quite a passionate one. I have always identified with children, I suppose, have a childlike nature, and maybe more importantly, have been very protective of children my whole life. And what ended up unfolding in my protectiveness, in wanting to create an environment, and I mean, it started with the children in my own life, in wanting to create an environment that's conducive to their learning, their growth, their sense of empowerment. I started writing for children. And when I started, I never looked back. So yeah, that's maybe the one of the biggest reasons why I'm here, and why what I do is relevant to the space of conscious parenting, which I love. But yeah, I'm a storyteller. If I could summarize who I am, I'm a storyteller, and stories come through me, and mine is to share them. So that's me.
That is beautiful. So you touched on the fact that you are a storyteller. Let's talk about the first time you put pen on paper, and you decided that you were going to write that book. What were you going through, and what actually motivated you to write your first book?
Yeah, like I mentioned before, I've always been very aware of, particularly at the time, it was more the children in my life, so my nieces and nephews, and just their experiences. And in this particular space, I think growing up, I had my own concerns of language, and particularly our local languages, and with the way things have gone, how we're losing the essence of that. And it started with looking at myself, how, I mean, I remember I grew up in Tat in the Eastern Cape, and there was this video I once saw of myself. I was very young. How I spoke Xhosa then was incredibly fluent. And that was first language, but with migration, moved to Joburg, and maybe the schools I went to, I lost my connection to the language in that pure form. And then I also didn't do as close as Kolweni. So the older I mean, when I was in school, I don't think I thought about it much, but when I got out of school and I was older, I was just like, oh, I missed something. I missed something, not knowing how to, not knowing the rules of the language, how to write in the language. But now I'm out of school, right? And as it happens, the one thing that, because I was in awareness of it, when I was observing my nieces, and for them, it was a migration from living at home and being exposed to your home language. Excuse me. So Bona, their mom is Umzulu. Well, she's not Umzulu, but that's one of the languages she speaks. And their home language that they spoke was isiZulu. And then when they started school, like preschool, then I noticed that, oh, they're speaking less. And this is now, they're even younger than I was when I started losing language. So it was just seeing that progression and that concern of, so what happens if we kind of don't do anything about it? Are we just gonna, because it's up to us. I mean, you can't expect the kids to be aware of this. So that kind of inspired my first book. I just wanted, from an early age, to create an awareness. Like I said, it started with the kids in my own life, but then the more I spoke to other parents, the more I spoke to anyone really, and particularly there's this aunt of mine who's a lecturer. And when I shared this concern with her, she was like, you know what, Refiloe, and this was kind of like a trigger moment, because she used to lecture at F40, and she would say that because you'd get kids or students coming from all over the country, they would speak different languages. And sometimes, maybe they wouldn't understand the English so well. And she said how she would say to them, Uguti, my job is to instruct in English. However, I speak 6 of the 11 official languages. If there's anything you don't understand, like, chances I can explain it to you in your own language. And when she said that, like, it sparked something in me. And I thought to myself, you know what, we do have multiple languages. And if at the very least, as South Africans, we can greet someone in their mother tongue, we should at least know how to say hello in all the official languages. And that was the birth of my first book. And the intention about that was really like just to create that awareness, even for kids, that we may come from these different backgrounds. And yes, now they may be in a school where the medium of instruction is English, but you can bring whatever language you come with into the space and share it with your friends. So that's where the idea behind that first book came from.
That is beautiful. So that must have opened up you to even a bigger world where you now even had to maybe perhaps learn even more languages than you had known at that time. There's something special about language and just how it connects you to people. How was the process like of actually seeing that a simple greeting can actually open up doors and really make people welcome you, and more than just a hello, open up a world of a conversation?
Yes.
What was that process like?
Yeah, it was really beautiful. And I must say, as someone who is now writing the book, I needed to go and do the research to find out I didn't even know all the 11 ways to say hello. So that in itself, the process started there, because I had to stop and be like, whoa, okay, myself, I only know 4, and I had to go find people who speak the other languages to help me. So you see, it was already just starting with myself, it was already like a process of getting to learn about others. But what it has done and what has been beautiful about it is I think the one thing that I still see to this day is the light in people's eyes when they hear about the book or talk about the book. And because again, it's like you are being seen, and that's what this book is about. How many ways can you say hello was the first book I wrote. It was recognizing an other. That's what you're doing by simple greeting. It can be quite a lot to learn a whole new language, but maybe You know, you don't always have to learn all the languages, but just to take that effort to say, I see you, you know, it's a similar thing to making sure that, for instance, you pronounce someone's name properly, because that name has a meaning. And by you taking the effort to be like, okay, hold on, can I make sure that I say it right? I'm recognizing the meaning that was intended by the people who named you. And it's similar with greeting someone in their home language. It's like, I recognize where you're from, who you are, your family. It's like very, very layered. But obviously, like, for children in its most simplified form. But I think it works for children and adults.
Yes, certainly. Yeah. So you touched a little bit on, you know, how you lost a bit of your language because of having migrated to Johannesburg.
Yeah.
In essence, or in your experience, what are the reasons why? Is that the only reason why we lose touch with our mother tongue, or are there other factors at play?
Oh, I think they many things. And I'm not one who likes to almost like generalize, because I know my situation well, right? I know the people around me well. But essentially, it's one of those things because of the way the world is now. And I've just seen it practically. If you look at our engagement, if, for instance, I'll take an example. If I'm in an English medium school, so that's, you know, it's predominantly English during the day. If then the television, the shows I'm watching are English. And then this is the big one. If the people in my house, my parents, are also speaking the English with each other.
Yes.
So where is a child going to be exposed to it? I'll cut chance, you know what I'm saying, already. And also then it also, because ultimately, language also needs to be useful. It's a form of communication. It needs to be useful. And if, like, I'm not using it, then I will lose it for sure. There is, and there's certain things I've seen, like other languages I've learned that I haven't been using much. For instance, I remember in grade 8 and 9, I learned French. And I was doing really well, right? But that was like 2 years. Do I still know it? Do I still know all not so I might remember some words. Do you get what I'm saying? Or even Afrikaans, which I did for 12 years of high school.
Yeah.
So I realized but now I'm almost like reconnecting with it. But there was a gap between when I did it in school and not using it up until now. Like, some of my books are translated to Afrikaans, so I'm getting reconnected to the language again. But for the time that I wasn't, it's like a muscle that's not being used.
Yes.
And it's the same, I think, with all the languages, even as Xhosa that I was talking about, my own. When I was in Mthatha, it's the main language spoken in the town. It was the main language spoken between my mom and I. There were so many factors. You know, where I am using it, it is useful. And then when you take that away, then like when I came to Gauteng and my name is Refiloe, here, so then already my name creates the impression that I speak Sotho. You know, I learned, so I can understand Sotho. Most of what I learned later on in my life, and it was mostly survival. Because of having this name being here, it created such drama, having to always explain. So you get tired of explaining. Even like, you know, when you get called by people in the call center, so they'll just start talking. They're not gonna. So I got so tired of explaining that I was just like, maybe I just need to know what people are saying. And that's how I got to, at least to survive. I can hear you. I may not be able to speak as well, but like, to survive in Joburg, I can hear. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's those kinds of things. And that's why I'm saying language is also, it needs to be useful. So I need to find a place to use it, otherwise I won't.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you spoke a little bit about, the meaning to the name. Maybe, I mean, I think you are a gift to us, but maybe you can tell us what the meaning of your name is without me having to say anything.
Oh yeah, so Refiloe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually putting it together because my middle name is Palisa. Refiloe, Palisa, Refiloe meaning we are given, Palisa flower. So it's like we are given a flower, and it's something I now, particularly with Know My Name and part of the team, I bring it up because our names do have meaning. It's not like I always say to the kids, like, do you think your parents went like suck your name out of, do you get what I'm saying? They like out of the air. No, there's an intention. Actually, those are the words I use. Our names are an intention. And like if you look at it, talking about conscious parenting, with an intention as well. The more you say it, the more you put it out into the universe.
Yes. Yes.
So now, if you take your name and consider that, the more my name gets said, the more it's an intention. So think about how many times your name gets said by others and by yourself, but particularly when you're younger. Every time, like every time someone says Refiloe and Nam Yasadela, I'm responding. I'm responding to my name and its meaning. So it's very, very powerful. And I think in being conscious of its power, then it's best to have some wisdom into the name that you give your child, right? Because it is, yeah.
No, sorry to cut you short. On the topic of power, what do you think are the dynamics between, reading for leisure and reading to be educated? What are the intricacies that we probably, us as parents, need to understand as we try to forge a reading culture within our children?
Yeah. Okay, so maybe let me start with the bigger picture on why do we want our children to know how to read? Do you get what I'm saying? I see the education and all of that, but like what for the human being that is becoming, what do we really want for them? And what you want is, at least let me speak for myself, my intention and what I would like for children is for them to be empowered, for them to be independent, right? For them in experiencing or learning anything, for them to be able to find out for themselves versus being dependent on someone else's experience, someone else's words, someone else's, do you get what I'm saying? And the way to do that, how research like that works, for you to find out for yourself, you need to look for yourself. And looking for yourself involves reading, whatever it is. If you're traveling and you need to read like find your way, knowing how to read a map, because reading also comes with comprehension. So in a bigger scheme, this is like a survival on how to be a human independently. You want your child to be able to essentially survive without you. That's what you want.
Oh, wow.
To be self-empowered. And what reading does, it takes away, again, like I said, it takes away the dependency on hearing from other people, because hearing from other people is like other people's opinions, their own experience, their own influences, which is not necessarily anything wrong with that. But you want a child to be able to be like, oh, I heard Refiloe, let's say, in an interview, and she spoke about this, ne? And then they go and do their own research. They can go and maybe read 30 whatever books, 30 entries, whatever, different sources of information. And then having read all of that for themselves, they are the ones that can be like, you know what? out of all of this, I hear the different people's opinions. This is the one that I think resonates the most with me. So, and so for me, in a bigger scheme of things, that's what reading opens up.
Okay.
So there's the survival side, and then there's just the beauty of stories. Again, when you're experiencing them for yourself. So I have a friend of mine that, like, she is an avid reader, okay? And because her and I chat all the time, and because she reads like series that have like 20 books, right? Her and I chat all the time, and sometimes some of our chats is her just telling me what's happening in this book that she's reading. So I sometimes read books through her.
Yes.
But because it's through her, or even movies, like she's telling me stories, but because it's through her, I'm not experiencing it for what it is. I'm experiencing it for her interpretation of what it is. Do you get what I'm saying? And so that's what also reading also opens up children to go and open up their own imaginations. Like, find out for themselves in experiencing a story, what do they take out of it versus like hearing it secondhand. And that's what, like, when people talk about the imagination opens up their creativity, it's like, reading through it, for instance, versus watching are two very different experiences. I know a lot of kids watch now, but if we can get it right, at least at the foundation, it opens up their minds to that, right? But again, going back to your question, so the reading for enjoyment really is about engaging with stories and engaging with storytelling, because in reading stories, we also find ourselves. And sometimes that's really important for a child to recognize themselves within characters, and it opens up conversations between parents and child, teachers and child. It's they learning tools, né? And then with that excitement of what you can get out of reading for enjoyment, I think when it comes to education, it's just the next step. It's not so much like a drag, because you're already being educated, maybe not necessarily in school curriculum, but your mind's already open to experiencing new worlds. Do you get what I'm saying? Which is what you get from reading from enjoyment. By the time you get to now taking in education, you already have a mind that's almost conditioned to absorbing information. So that's how, like, it all links.
Your passion is, oh my gosh, I'm getting goosebumps just from your passion and how you speak about it. I think whilst we're on that, I want to ask you, and I know you don't want to generalize, you've just mentioned, but honestly and fairly, are we a reading nation?
Yeah, I mean, there's always stats, and I'm not going to deny that, right? There's always stats on the issues we have. I think I consciously don't take them in, because I think that could be quite depressing for me. But it's like really high, and what they on just children who can't read for meaning, and not even like at elementary. I think like sometimes they'll be like kids in grade 4. Grade 4 is so far in primary school. So how did they pass? How do you pass? And I know, like, I mean, I've had like lots of conversations, even with lecturers, the same aunt that I spoke about, lecturing at university, and there's still an issue with reading for meaning. So that is, and it goes back again to, I think, what I mentioned about survival as a human being, because it just makes it more difficult. The further you go, it makes it more difficult. If you're struggling to process information as a child, and then unfortunately, then we have the situation in our country sometimes where kids get promoted because it's like and then like without really passing. Unfortunately, if a child keeps getting promoted without knowing how to process information, then the adult you'll get will be an adult who also still struggles with processing information. So when they're in the working world, how does that come into play? So it's just like this ripple effect that if we don't address it earlier on, then we are the ones that are going to deal with it later on. And unfortunately, so will that adult who, as a child, it wasn't addressed. It kind of just doesn't end. And isn't that one of the biggest survival skills? Ability to process anything for meaning. You know? That how do you and I know success is relative, but in whatever, I'm not going to put specific marks, but in anything that you're doing, if there's no meaning to it, if it's just for the sake of doing it, then what's the point?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So for the person,
yeah. So with that said, I mean, you are an author. We look to you. We bombard you with, okay, so now we have this situation where maybe a child is unable to read with meaning. What do we do in that instance? How, in like practically as a parent, maybe what tips can you give me to get my child to get to a point where they start reading with meaning? Is there anything that I can do as a parent without leaving it so much so on the teachers? Because
on teachers,
that's where the issue lies, where, you know, the parent doesn't necessarily play the role that they, or doesn't believe that there's a role that they can play which can contribute to the child's success in terms of reading for meaning.
And maybe that's why there's so much focus on reading for enjoyment, because somehow I don't know why reading up in South Africa, it's like it's associated with school. Like, do you get what I'm saying? That it's like it's something that you bring into school, but it's definitely like Indo Yasekai, you know. And with anything, I think when it comes to and this is like what's needed in with maturity in adults, is knowing that if I would like something for my child, I have to show them that I do it too.
Yeah, boy.
Like it, you know, like as opposed to like, hey, right now. Do you get what I'm saying? So if there's a reading concern, then the reading concern needs to be addressed as a family. Because sometimes, I mean, kids are really smart. Like, you telling them to read when they never see you reading. Do you get what I'm saying? So I think, especially if now it's become like a big concern that needs to be addressed, then reading needs to be part of our ritual as a family. All of us, everyone's involved, you know. And the thing is, why that's important and why like reading to your child is almost recommended every night. It's not just the reading, it's the connection that happens between parent and child. Because also, I mean, it's important to find an engaging story, an interesting story, because kids love stories, whatever format it comes, right? So it's about finding the engaging stories, and then knowing that actually what is really important is you engaging them. That's what they want. It now comes down to like emotions. They like every human being, children want to be seen, and particularly want to be seen by their parents. So if now we have this dedicated activity where I'm going to have this time with my parents, even if it's 10 minutes, because I know it gets tricky, like we live in these busy lives, and sometimes parents struggle to even find those 10 minutes. You know, you're coming back from work, you're tired, all these things. But that dedicated time with kids, for them, it's like the joy of spending time with my parents in the storytelling. That's where it starts. It's actually an emotional association. And then that emotional association then transfers reading, you know, like the association with reading is of joy, is of connection, is of family. And that kind of emotion transfers to whenever they read moving forward. That's just how we are as human beings. Like, you know what I'm saying? And that's why, for instance, kids love you repeating things. I have like my niece, the youngest one. I don't know when I got her this book. I'm a huge Junior Dinosaur fan, eh? And there's this book, something fluff, anyway, to send libel in the title. But something on the flum tree. Anyway, so I think it was just one of the books that I read to her out loud that she really enjoyed, because like I also do all the actions and all of that. Every time I had to read to this child, there's a library. There's so I'll even bring new books.
Oh,
and then she's like, please, can you read Jack and the Flum Tree over and over? I'm like, again, you know. So then I even said to her mom, how this child, like, out of all these books, she wants this one. And then her mom was like, I think she just enjoy. It's the association. So she's not. It's not about the story anymore. It's like she enjoys me telling the story and just what she's experienced before. It's all emotional. That's children. That's children. And that's us as well, if you think about it. We're also very emotional beings. But it's just recognizing that, finding fun ways. And I think also sometimes we need to have this kind of conversation with children on why it's important. As opposed to, again, just say, hey. It's like sometimes you actually just need to have a real conversation with your child and be like, hey, this is why it's important. This is why I would like you to put some effort into this. And you'll be surprised sometimes just when you speak to them human to human, because they are also very capable human beings, how more understanding they can be versus just a command, So that's, I have many suggestions, but that's one.
I love that. So we just under 5 minutes left. I think just one more question. I don't want to, for parents who maybe might say, we are speaking, or to people who might say we are speaking from a point of privilege because we are able to read to our kids. What was any little, like you spoke about just how it's about emotion, being present, is to a parent who can't necessarily read, how important then does the aesthetics of a book, how important, how does that factor in? How can they factor that into to try get to a point where they do something as opposed to nothing? What can they do? I guess we understand maybe there are other parents who can't read. What can they do? Can they then focus on the picture books? What is it that they can do?
But they can't read, as in physically can't read, or don't have the time? What
they can't read about? Because let's say mhlawumbe abantu babuya ezilalini abazi isikhuwa, because yes.
So if your own parents can't read, that's an interesting one, right? And I think in that situation, if you as a parent can't read, there has to be a way that you can ask for support. This is where you ask for help. There's no other way. What are you going to do if you can't do it? Then it's like needing that extra support. Excuse me. And you do get some people who do need that, right? But I still think this is the thing. Even when you're looking, when you need help, there are times when it has to be you who's willing to ask for the help. I don't, because what else can be done? The child, that if you need extra support to help with it, and maybe then that's where it can be with teachers or or a cousin, someone who can, but because it's such a vital thing. And if you can't read as a parent, and then now your child can't, then it becomes like a cycle. So I think support is needed. Exposure to certain things. I know sometimes, I think Mhlobonene, for instance, still does storytelling on the radio, like looking at different sources. So those are some of the things. But yes, there are audiobooks, there are, and a lot of work is being done right now just to still expose your child. My number one instinctual answer to this is, where you need support,
Ask.
like ask,
Yeah.
as opposed to just almost like also being helpless watching your child. Again, going back to, you want the best for them.
Yes.
And hopefully, where you are both to ask, you will be rewarded.
Yeah.
There's always someone willing to help,
Certainly.
Yeah.
I could talk to you for hours. This is certainly a conversation that is worth watching over and over again. I'm certainly going to enjoy it whilst, after I post it. I want to give you maybe just the last word, maybe just before we close. What can we expect from you, and where can people find you if they want to reach out to you and engage with you?
Wow. So I'm quite active on social media. So just my name and my surname, Refiloe Moahloli, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. But yeah, if you go on my website though, you'll find my details, refiloemoahloli.com. I have a new book coming out. There's almost like a series. We Are One, You Are Loved. And then the next one coming up is Let's Play. Yeah, We Are One is the first one. Then You Are Loved came, and then the next one in that trilogy.
That's fine.
Let's Play. Oh wow, all your books gone.
All my books gone.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yeah, so that's coming out in November. So I have another picture book coming out soon. But I continue to do the work. Okay, I'm really enjoying it. I think that's also important to mention. The passion also comes from a place of enjoyment, and that's what keeps me going. Yeah.
I love that. I think that's where we will end it, because I want to use that as a way of keeping us going. You going is keeping us going. So I certainly hope that you never stop. And I wish you all of the very best in all the future books that you will write. This shelf, maybe it's a sign to say, I just need to replace all of them with your books. So I hope you will keep, and I hope you will continue writing so that the shelf can be filled up with all your books.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too.